I'm going to be grading every first round selection from the 2021 NFL Draft. It's been 4 years now. We already know who got their 5th year option and who didn't, so it's the perfect time to give out some final grades. Also, make sure to follow me on Twitter for some good football discussion and news on videos and giveaways. Starting with the Jags picking Trevor Lawrence at number 1, probably a top 3 quarterback prospect ever. He won the national title as a freshman at Clemson and had all the elite traits you could want in a quarterback. There was never really any debate as to whether or not he was worthy of going first overall, so this was an easy pick for the Jaguars. However, in the league, he hasn't been the difference maker most people expected him to be and has struggled to change Jacksonville's form. Trevor has had the most turnovers of any quarterback in his 4 seasons since entering the league in 2021, as well as the 17th most total touchdowns and 10th most passing yards. He's led Jacksonville to 1 playoff win in that time, which is less than Blake Bortles achieved on his rookie contract. Trevor's had moments where he's looked like a great quarterback, but has been inconsistent throwing downfield, has had spotty accuracy, and his arm strength is just okay. Nothing special. I still think he can be a franchise guy, but he just doesn't seem to be an elite quarterback that is going to consistently lead his team to the playoffs. Overall, you can't knock Jacksonville for this pick. Trevor was and still is the best QB from this class, and seems like he can be a plus-level starter, but he's just not a star quarterback. Next, we got Zach Wilson, the first top 10 selection to get an F grade in this series, and obviously the Jets had to be the team to do it. Wilson went crazy in his final season at BYU, putting up over 3,500 yards, 43 total touchdowns, and only throwing 3 picks, and his highlight reel was elite. His silky smooth throwing motion stood out, as well as his great arm strength and elite ability to throw on the run. However, that BYU team did a great job of masking his weaknesses. Their offensive line was dominant, they used a lot of deep play actions, and they moved the pocket around a bunch, which gave Wilson space and allowed him to see the field. Now, if you watch his tape from the year before at BYU, you'd see that he struggled to consistently see the field and make throws from the pocket. So when he ended up in the NFL, those weaknesses were once again visible. Wilson really struggled in the pocket and didn't have the mobility or playmaking ability to live outside of it. Ultimately, he didn't live up to the number 2 hype and is now a backup. Another F grade, Trey Lance at number 3, one of the craziest risks ever taken in a draft. Lance had less than 450 pass attempts in high school and college combined, and he played for an FCS school. On top of that, he had an average physical build, and he didn't even run the 40 at the combine, which was a little sus considering how important the mobility part of his game was to his value. Carson Wentz, another former North Dakota State guy, was also picked in the top 3 just 5 years before Lance, but he had far more experience at the quarterback position as well as elite size and arm strength, which Lance didn't have. Ultimately, this was an outrageous selection by the Niners. Trey wasn't ready for the league, and this was a terrible use of a high pick. He's also now a backup. Kyle Pitts at number 4. Is he a D-level player? No, but picking him at number 4 over the other guys Atlanta could have picked instead was insane. Kyle's film at Florida was great. He was an extremely fluid athlete and route runner. He truly looked like he was going to immediately be one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the league. But a pass-catching tight end at number 4 over Jamar Chase, Penei Sewell, Pat Surtain, it was a pretty insane pick. It was way too rich of a valuation for a tight end who didn't have a complete skill set. Now on the Falcons, he hasn't had the best receiving production, as he's had less than 700 receiving yards in 3 straight seasons. He's a solid player, but has an underwhelming skill set for this high of a selection. Next, Jamar Chase at number 5, an A-plus pick. Jamar was that dude in college, the main target for Joe Burrow in one of the greatest college offenses we've ever seen. Jamar was so good that teams overlooked Justin Jefferson. On top of that, all-pro corners A.J. Terrell and Trayvon Diggs were both getting mocked in the 2nd round. Trayvon did end up going 2nd round because of how badly Chase burned both of them in college. Since getting into the league, Chase has consistently been a top 3 wide receiver and has more touchdowns than any other receiver during that time, and the 2nd most receiving yards per game, behind only Justin Jefferson. He's also coming off a Triple Crown season. Overall, this was an excellent pick. Chase is a superstar, works well with Burrow, and he's a huge factor for Cincy having one of the best offenses in the league. Now hold on a second, fellas. Let me get on camera quick. Speaking of factor, let me tell you guys something, man. If you get the number 1 pick in the draft, you want a prospect that makes achieving your goals easier. So when it comes to picking my meal plan, I go with the cleanest prospect in the class, and that's Factor. Factor has provided me with consistently quality meals and has helped me manage a day job while also making YouTube content and keeping up with game film. It's important to keep your ball knowledge up, but don't let your grub knowledge falter. Factor provides fresh, never frozen, dietitian-approved meals right to your doorstep. You pop a container in the microwave, and 2 minutes later, you have a chef-crafted meal that looks good, smells good, tastes good, and it helps you stay fired up for the rest of the day. Factor has 35 different meal options on their weekly menu, including Calorie Smart, Keto, and my personal favorite, Protein Plus. They offer 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can pause or reschedule your deliveries at any time. Head to Factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50SG to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50SG at Factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Now back to the video. So through 5 picks, let's look at the grade tiers here. Some rough picks in the 2 to 4 range. And the worst top 5 out of the years we've looked at so far. but Jamar Chase did end it off pretty strong. Next up, we got Jalen Waddle at number 6. There aren't many receivers that can consistently beat defenses deep, but Waddle is one of them. His skill set forces defenses to be honest and opens the intermediate area of the field as well as the running game for his offense. He's also an underrated route runner and is tough to guard in man coverage. He maybe wasn't the best player on the board at pick 6. Waddle is limited physically at 5'9", 180 and doesn't help Miami in terms of toughness, which they've struggled with, but he does provide them with a unique and valuable skill set. So I think the pick does make sense looking back. He's been productive so far, had some 1,000-yard seasons. Overall, it was a good selection, and Miami gets a B+. Penei Sewell, at the time, there was a lot of debate at pick number 5 about Sewell versus Chase, O-line versus wide receiver. But in the end, football is about elite players, and both fit that category and have helped their teams become Super Bowl contenders. Sewell had elite tape in college and was, and still is, built thick, under 6'5", but 331 pounds, and is still able to be an above-average athlete at the position. Sewell's now a 2-time first-team All-Pro and one of the cornerstones of Detroit's elite offense. Sewell only allowed 1 sack and 5 quarterback hits this season, while also being graded as the second best offensive tackle in run blocking per PFF. Overall, he's a franchise tackle, and this was an A+ pick. J.C. Horn at number 8. Horn being the first defensive player off the board was pretty shocking. Surtain was expected to be that guy, and there was some rumblings about Micah Parsons possibly going to Carolina, but the Panthers ended up going with J.C. Horn came in as a big physical corner with an elite profile. He was built to play press man, which is what you want when you're picking a corner in the top 10. However, JC didn't and still doesn't have the best closing speed or change of direction, which makes it difficult for him to close on breaks and is also the reason for him not having the best ball production. Surtain was less physical in college compared to Horn, but was much flashier in terms of what he could do in off coverage and how quickly he could close space. Horn's a good player for the Panthers when he can stay healthy. He's shown the ability to be a top 10 corner, but ultimately Carolina passed on this year's Defensive Player of the Year for a less skilled player at the same position. Now to Denver picking Surtain. Corner wasn't necessarily a position of need for Denver, but when you get a chance to get an elite player, you got to take it. Out of all the skilled defensive backs to come out of Alabama, Surtain as a prospect might have been the best. He came into the league with incredible length, good press technique, and a versatile skill set that made him effective in multiple schemes. At Alabama, he had impressive reps versus all different shapes and sizes of receivers and even tight ends, and he was really impressive at the catch point. Surtain was a complete prospect and was a steal at pick number 9 for Denver, and now he's one of the best defensive players in the league. Devontae Smith at number 10, with Alshon Jeffrey being cut a month before the draft. The Eagles were thin in the receiver room, so Smith was an obvious pick for them after trading up. Even while being a physical anomaly for top college players at 6'1", 170, Smith was still dominant in college against top competition and clearly had the skill set to be a reliable target in the pros. The former Heisman winner was and still is super smooth as a route runner and has a great feel for rhythm and timing and how to manipulate defenders. He's also excellent at the catch point and consistently makes big plays. Smith's a reliable target for Philly, has had some great production, and he's a perfect fit for the team, so this pick gets an A-. After 10 picks, let's look at the grades. That 5 to 10 range was pretty strong. Overall, there's already 3 A+ picks, and besides really the quarterbacks, this draft started off really strong. Now moving on, Justin Fields at number 11. At the time of the draft, this seemed like a pretty good pick. Many thought Fields was the second best QB in the class behind Trevor Lawrence, and he kind of ended up being that technically. Fields was a great quarterback at Ohio State, great size, super tough as a player, strong enough arm to deliver the ball to tight spots, and he was mobile enough to extend plays. This pick made a lot of sense for Chicago, but Fields has had a rocky go in the league so far. He's struggled as a passer and has consistently had issues seeing the field and has walked himself into a lot of sacks. He did have some good stretches in Chicago and established himself as a legit elite running threat, but was ultimately deemed not good enough to keep after Chicago got the first overall pick. I'm going to give this pick a C- just because at number 11, I think it was a reasonable swing for a quarterback, and Fields is still playing in the league and still has enough value to possibly get some more snaps elsewhere. Next, we got Dallas picking Micah Parsons at number 12, the first selection to break the scale, an A++ pick by the boys. Micah was a problem at Penn State and received SG approval before the draft. In the league, he immediately became a superstar, already a 3-time All-Pro, 4-time Pro Bowler, has 52.5 sacks in 63 career games. He's still on his rookie contract, but already looks like he could be a Hall of Famer. There's really nothing much else to say. Rashawn Slater at number 13, the final elite non-QB prospect in this run of picks. The 5 to 13 range in this draft was absolutely crazy in terms of talent. Slater was stamped as a first-round pick after locking up Chase Young during his sophomore season at Northwestern, and might have gone top 10 if he measured in with longer arms. His are only 33 inches long, and usually for top tackles, you're hoping for something closer to at least 34 inches. Nonetheless, Slater was and still is a technician in pass protection and is super smooth in all phases as a blocker. He just had the best season of his career, only allowing 3 sacks, 7 QB hits, 12 hurries, and he graded as the second best offensive tackle per PFF. This was seen as a great pick back in 21, still looks like a great pick today, and has paid off big time for the Chargers. Elijah Vera Tucker, he was a quality tackle in his last year at USC, but due to his 32-inch long arms, a move to guard was guaranteed for him in the NFL. He came in a little bit light for the position at 6'4", 308, but his athletic profile was very strong, 90th percentile vertical jump, 87th percentile bench, and that showed up on tape. He was able to make an impact as a puller and showcased impressive anchoring ability. A guard at pick 14 might be a little rich, but adding to the offensive line is never a bad idea. In the league, Tucker has been solid. 2024 was his best year, only 4 sacks allowed, 4 QB hits, and only 8 hurries. Tucker also gave up the 3rd lowest pressure rate amongst guards. He's been a reliable blocker for the Jets, but hasn't quite become a difference maker yet, so for now this pick gets a B. McCorkle Jones. If we were ranking based on best ankle lock, then this would be an easy A+. But as far as football goes, this one gets a D-. Mac played on a stacked Alabama team, and after winning the national title, he started gaining some first-round buzz. But he didn't really have any elite traits in his game and projected to be an average quarterback at best. He never had the skill set to uplift an NFL offense, so picking him in the top half of the first round just really made no sense. The Pats didn't take the best player on the board and picked a low-ceiling quarterback, so this pick gets a D-. Zaven Collins at pick 16. He was dominant at Tulsa, had some nice tape, and had a huge frame, coming in at 6'5", 260. He started off with the Cardinals as an off-ball linebacker, but has now transitioned to more of an edge role, and 2024 was a solid year for him. He was graded as the 4th best run defender per PFF and had 27 run stops. He also added 6 sacks and 23 hurries. Collins is trending upwards and has slowly improved himself as a player and earned himself a second contract with the Cardinals, but overall he's been somewhat underwhelming. We'll see what he can do in the future. Next, we got Alex Leatherwood, the most surprising pick of the first round. The 22-year-old tackle from Alabama was expected to go at some point on day 2 as maybe the 8th or 9th tackle off the board, but instead the Raiders made him the 3rd tackle to get picked. Leatherwood had an excellent combine, posting 90th percentile scores in broad jump, vertical jump, and the 40-yard dash. However, his film at Alabama was not that impressive, and he was clearly a work in progress at best. Leatherwood had a bunch of issues in pass protection and wasn't ready for serious snaps in the NFL. He ended up struggling at tackle, got moved to guard, and ended up being released from the Raiders less than 2 years after the draft. One of the worst selections in recent memory. Jalen Phillips at pick 18. Phillips was the most productive edge in the class and had an impressive length athleticism combo that would likely transition well to the big league. However, injuries were a big concern with him due to him missing a lot of time with concussions and an ankle and wrist injury in college. When he's been on the field for Miami, he has been a plus starter. Phillips had 19 sacks in his first 2 seasons and really popped off in 2022 when he had 17 QB hits and 44 hurries on top of 10 sacks and 36 run stops. Unfortunately, the past 2 years, he's missed significant time with injuries, and now his future with the team isn't so clear. His 5th year will determine if he gets a second contract. Overall, he's a great edge for Miami, but he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. At number 19, Jamin Davis. The Ron Rivera Commanders officially complete a 3-peat of first-round F grades. Jamin was a freaky athletic linebacker prospect out of Kentucky. He had 90th percentile scores in every athletic test he did and had 99th percentile explosiveness scores. His athleticism flashed on tape, however, he only had 11 starts at linebacker in college and was still a work in progress. He was expected to come off the board in maybe the second round. Even with the athleticism and physical traits he possessed, Jamin still struggled with diagnosing plays and didn't have the desired toughness for the position. Ultimately, Davis struggled in Washington, got cut, and he's now a backup for the Jets. Kadarius Toney at number 20. Pre-draft, he was looked at as maybe the best receiver in the class besides Chase and Waddle in terms of ability to gain yards after the catch. Toney flashed immediate acceleration in college and was excellent at changing direction and making tacklers miss. He had the potential to be really valuable in the short game. However, Toney struggled to stay on the field in college and wasn't the best route runner and didn't have the best long speed, so he wasn't really a vertical threat. Those issues followed him to the pros, and combined with some rumored off-the-field problems, he was shipped out of New York before the end of his second season. He became a punt return weapon and a gadget player for KC, but still didn't have much value, and now he's a free agent. After 20 picks, let's look at the grade tiers again. This draft was pretty top-heavy, and things started getting ugly after the Rashawn Slater pick. You can also clearly see how some of these first-round misses affected their teams for years to come. Basically, all the D and F grade teams have gone through a rough stretch since this draft. Now to pick 21, Kwity Paye. He was a really interesting prospect coming out of Michigan. Team captain with great speed and power, but didn't have the best quickness or size or mental processing and had mediocre production. Paye was physically gifted, but a raw player, which was a bit concerning considering he was at Michigan for 4 years. For the Colts, he's been solid. Paye's put up average numbers every season so far in his career. He's yet to hit double-digit sacks, and he's had exactly 28 run stops each of the last 3 years. Paye is one of the best tacklers in the league at edge with a 6.6 career missed tackle percentage. That percentage would put him 8th amongst all edges this year. Overall, he's an average edge player, so we'll give the Colts a C. Next, we got Caleb Farley. He was a cornerback prospect with elite physical traits, great tape, and he would have easily gone in the top 10 if it wasn't for his severe injury history. Farley had a torn ACL and multiple back operations before the draft. For that reason, it was a bit surprising when the Titans picked him in the first round. Farley unfortunately tore his ACL again in 2021 and then experienced back problems in his sophomore year, and he was ultimately released in 2024. This was a high-risk pick by the Titans, and it just didn't work out. Darrisaw at number 23, finally another A grade. This was an absolute steal for the Vikings. Darrisaw was the consensus third best tackle in the class and had a bunch of plus traits: great feet, athleticism, a strong punch, great hips. Christian was great in pass protection and as a run blocker. He had some room to improve with his technique, but overall a very promising tackle. And he's been great for Minnesota. Darrisaw has yet to allow more than 12 pressures in a season and has consistently been graded as one of the better tackles in the league. Overall, he's a franchise guy for the Vikings, making this an A-plus pick at number 23. Najee Harris at number 24 at 6'1", 232. He's a pretty huge back, and he's been a workhorse for the Steelers. Since entering the league, Najee has been within the top 7 for most carries in each of his first 4 seasons. He's uniquely durable, and because of that, he's been able to put up 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons. However, when you pick a running back in the first round, you expect him to have an elite aspect to his game, and Najee just doesn't really have one. He lacks speed, struggles to create big plays, and isn't a real threat in the pass game. In 2024, he averaged 2.9 yards after contact per attempt, which was tied for 33rd in the league, 4.0 yards per attempt, which was ranked 38th, and he had a 24.5 breakaway run percentage, which was 26th amongst running backs. He's been one of the least efficient runners in the league, and it'd be a pretty big surprise if the Steelers gave him a second contract. At number 25, Jacksonville decided to pair Trevor Lawrence with his college teammate Travis Etienne. Travis was an explosive runner at Clemson and had 16 career touchdowns of over 44 yards. He was a patient runner with great top-end speed. However, for the Jags, he hasn't been very good. In 2024, he averaged 2.48 yards after contact per attempt, which was 51st, 3.7 yards per attempt, 44th in the league, and had a breakaway run percentage of 19%, 36th in the league. He also allowed the second most pressures in pass protection of any running back and lost touches to Tank Bigsby. Overall, he's been poor for the Jags, and this was an overdraft at the time, and the pick looks even worse now. Next, Greg Newsome. He was locked down at Northwestern and had a decent physical profile at 6'1", 190, and was a solid athlete coming in. Cleveland picked up his 5th-year option before the 2024 season. However, after his struggles this year, there's a chance he might get cut at some point. Newsome allowed the 12th highest pass rating in coverage, the 7th most yards per reception, and had the 4th highest missed tackle percentage. It was his worst year so far in the NFL. Overall, this pick was fair at the time. This wasn't the deepest draft class, but still Newsome has been underwhelming in the league, so this pick gets a C-. Rashad Bateman at number 27. Bateman had great tape at Minnesota, but really underwhelming physical and athletic scores. 6'1", 190, and he failed to get over a 75th percentile score in any of his athletic testing. As a prospect, he already had a polished set of release moves, and he was a plus route runner and had good ball skills, but just lacked the twitch and explosiveness to really be a top receiver. Bateman was a high floor, low ceiling type of player. He's had a role for Baltimore so far, but has failed to stand out and hasn't eclipsed 800 yards yet, so this pick gets a C-. Peyton Turner, not many expected him to go in the first round. He was a big defensive end with a great physical and athletic profile, but his skill set was unpolished and he came from a smaller school, so he didn't have experience against top competition. Turner was expected to go on day 2 because of those reasons. So far for the Saints, he's been unproductive and has struggled to find himself a role while also battling some injuries. He's yet to get over 2 sacks in a season and likely will become a free agent. Overdrafting Turner didn't pay off for the Saints. Eric Stokes, another surprise first-round selection. The Georgia corner had solid size at 6'1", 190 and good explosiveness scores. However, he was tight-hipped and struggled to change direction, which greatly limited his potential as a cornerback and made him more of a third-round type player. He wasn't even the best corner on the board, but still, the Packers picked him. Stokes has struggled with injuries, but when he's been on the field, he hasn't been that great. He allowed an 80-plus reception percentage in 2022 and 23, and has also allowed over a 96 passer rating in each of the last 3 seasons. Stokes' 5th-year option got declined, and it's unlikely he'll be back in Green Bay. Next, we got Greg Rousseau. Considering how thin this draft was talent-wise, this turned out to be an excellent pick by Buffalo. Rousseau came in with elite size, 90th percentile height, wingspan, and hand size, and 94th percentile 10-yard split. However, his athletic scoring was really rough, and he only played 1 full season in college. So this pick was risky, but Rousseau's now probably Buffalo's most dependable edge rusher. He's had over 35 pressures in each of the last 2 seasons and has 28 sacks so far in his career. He's done that while playing in some crowded edge rooms, so he hasn't had a crazy number of snaps up until 2024. Overall, he's a quality starter for the Bills, so this pick gets an A grade. Odafe Oweh at pick 31, an insane athlete. Oweh put up 90th percentile scores in every exercise at the Combine. His tape showed his impressive twitch and explosiveness, as well as his strength and speed. However, Oweh was still raw as a prospect when he came into the league, and lacked technique in the pass rush plan and didn't have great production in college. Always been solid so far for the Ravens, putting up over 23 hurries in each of his 4 seasons, and he just notched his first double-digit sack campaign in 2024. He's slowly putting things together and has carved out a role for himself in this Ravens defense. Overall, always a solid starter, and the Ravens get a B grade for this selection. Finally, Joe Tryon, another raw edge player, but with not so much upside. Good length and size, but lacking top-end traits to be a real difference maker. He's been underwhelming so far in Tampa, hasn't had over 5 sacks in a season, has a 20% career missed tackle percentage, and has failed to prove himself as a starter. Tampa declined his 5th-year option, so he's going to free agency. Overall, this pick lacked potential at first and just didn't work out at all, so the pick gets a D+. Let's look at the final grade tiers here. This is probably the worst class we've looked at so far in terms of depth. There were only 2 A grades from picks 14 to 32 and a lot of Ds and Fs overall. So those are my thoughts on the first round rookies from 2021. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you like the content. Thanks for watching, and I'm out.